Well, the consequence of relativism is that in the end we'll each have our own reality. I have my reality, you have your reality. What objective truth says is that there's one you, there's one reality. And truth for me and truth for you are bound to that same reality. And if that's not the case, if we each have our own truth, and therefore we each have our own reality, the consequence of that is that ultimately communication itself becomes impossible. If our words don't have some kind of fixed meaning, then communication becomes impossible. And in fact, we each live in our own worlds, isolated in our own worlds, not even really able to communicate. In the classical understanding, there's reality. And reality is the measure of truth for me, and the very same reality is the measure of truth for you. How are we going to decide on a meaning of something? If reality doesn't determine the meaning, and we each have our own truths, well then what's the only possibility? If we're going to decide on a meaning, then either I have to make you yield to my meaning, or you have to make me yield to your meaning. There's no arbiter that stands outside of both of us, to which we both have to submit. Either I submit to you or you submit to me. And there's no way out. There's no way out of that. I think that's why Sartre, in a play entitled No Exit, No Way Out, ends with the famous statement that hell is other people. And if we're all defining our own reality, if truth is relative to each of us, well then, what do we do when we confront the other? We have to make that other yield to our vision of truth, to our vision of reality. But the other's going to do the same to us. And so we're going to be locked in this conflict with the other. Whose vision will win? Whose vision will prevail? And so intimacy becomes impossible. And the realm of intimacy, the realm of interpersonal intimacy, becomes a battleground. It's the battle of the gods, because we're each creating our own universe. We're each creating our own cosmos. And whose cosmos will be the prevailing cosmos? Well, the one who has more power, the one who has the power to make the other yield. It's kind of ironic because it can seem that relativism can provide a way in which, hey, well, we can all just get along, because hey, I got my truth, you got your truth. And maybe as long as we can stay as far apart from each other as possible, each dwelling in our own universes, such that our universes kind of collide as little as possible, kind of like as atomistically separated as possible, well then maybe we can avoid conflict. We can avoid the inevitable conflict of determining whose universe will be the prevailing universe. But that's a system that's predicated upon isolation, that's predicated upon the greatest possible separation of each individual little god. And that's just it's a devastating vision of the human person, because it precisely goes against our deepest instinct, which is our deepest instinct, in fact, for intimacy and for communion. You're not going to be able to have true communion unless you can have a common language, and the only source of that common language is going to be a common reality that you share, not as a god of that reality, but as a receiver of that reality. Both, as I said before, both equally subject to reality, not each creating our own reality, but equally sharing in that which is given to us.